Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, your host, and I'm so thrilled and very humbled to have a very special guest with us today, Rick Carson. When it comes to gremlin taming, Rick Carson wrote the book, literally. He is the author of 4 HarperCollins books. His seminal work, Taming Your Gremlin, a surprisingly simple method for getting out of your own way, is a bestseller since its publication in 1984. It has been translated into numerous languages and revised in 2003. Its sequel, A Masterclass in Gremlin Taming, was published in 2008. For nearly 5 decades, Rick has been a practicing psychotherapist, personal and executive coach, consultant to businesses, nonprofit organizations, US government agencies, and more. He is an approved supervisor for the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and a former faculty member at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. Welcome, Rick.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely. I'm grateful. I'm honored to be here, Vered. Did you catch that five decades?
Yeah.
That's a long time. Scary.
And a lot of wisdom and experience, I imagine, accumulated during that time. And I was first exposed to your work when I began my professional coach training. And we had learned at the time about, the concept of like an inner critic or an inner ally. And I remember kind of looking for more information on that and found your book and read it and shared it and used it with clients. And so it's really a very sweet treat for me to get to have this conversation with you today.
No, it's my pleasure. Really, really, I'm not just saying that. I'm really looking forward to being with you.
Well, how about we kick things off, especially for people who might not yet be very familiar with your work. What do you mean by taming your gremlin? What are gremlins?
Well, just keep in mind that every interpersonal encounter, every dilemma, every problem that comes up, again, intrapsychically, interpersonally, if you drill down on that, somewhere you're going to find that what's going on is a duality between a part of you, a part of me, part of all of us that is absolutely pure and true, knows exactly what to do. And then there's another side, call it the dark side. I had to come up for a term when I was writing the book. And I had an experience many years earlier that led me to use the term gremlin. This is before the movie Gremlins or any of that stuff. But what I'm writing about and what the book is about is that side of us that is really out to squelch that other side, which is really what gremlin taming is all about. Really, Vered, it's not about the gremlin. In the same way that a beautiful sculpture is not about the stone that ends up on the floor. It's about revealing who you really are on the inside, your heart of hearts, and learning to trust that. And it's not a lecture about that. It's a very precise method for learning how to do that. And I won't kid you, it takes practice. It's an overused phrase nowadays, simple but not easy. I've made that book, all of my books, as simple as possible. But you got to practice the method. And the payoff is tremendous, and it's forever unfolding. So I'll be glad to explain it to you as we go on instead of just bragging about it.
Well, this is a good starting place because, this concept of duality, I think, is one that is absolutely fascinating. And I think that once people really get that, then they refamiliarize themselves with the truth of who they really are. And so tell us a little bit more about the duality.
Well, let's start with what's true on the inside. It's been there since you popped out onto the planet. I've in various books given it various names, but you can't really circle it with a word. People call it soul or spirit, prana, ray, chi, ki, the primordial vibration, elan vital. In one book, I just called it life. Uh, it's the essence of the natural you, and it's been in there from the beginning. It's, again, you can't circle it with a word, but it can be experienced. It's not a philosophy. When you get all the stuff out of the way, you start to experience, at least you get a taste of that. And then you can gently start to direct your awareness to that. And it's a little like breathing on a flame. It starts to expand into your awareness. Now, the gremlin doesn't stop. The gremlin is, and people ask me all the time, well, where does it come from? Why do we have that? So here's the answer. I don't know. And neither does anybody else. But that duality exists within every human I've met on the planet. So your gremlin is not cute, Barrett. I really want to make that a point here. Your gremlin is out to squelch that vibrant soul within, and it works full time. So taming that thing requires starting to see it, starting to witness it. Doesn't have anything to do with figuring out a damn thing. I really want to get that across. It's about simply, this is a key phrase in gremlin taming, simply noticing, paying attention, the same kind of attention you pay to, a good movie, or in my case, the Andy Griffith Show, something like that. Doesn't require a lot of thinking. You just start paying attention, not only to what's going on within you and what's going on around you. That's pretty easy, but to what's going through your head. And this takes practice in the very moment that it's going through your head. So you start to witness the concepts, the beliefs you have about yourself. Start to see them at play. Okay. You start noticing the habits and behaviors that emerge out of those just by paying attention. If they no longer fit for you, they begin in a very natural way. I call it the art of graceful change, to disappear or at least get sanded down. Because at the point you witness them, you're in touch with the observer within, that heart of hearts, that force that we're talking about. The same one that learned to walk and talk. Didn't know anything about kinesiology, physiology, anything. You just noticed if you lean too far to the left, you bumped your head, started straightening up. It's the same way with this. You really start noticing, and in some cases, accentuating what you're doing to yourself. There's a natural correction that starts to occur. So I call it the Zen Theory of Change. And simply stated, it's something like this. I free myself from all this stuff. Every one of those beliefs you have about you is just an opinion you've developed loyalty to. So I free myself, and they're not all bad, but I free myself from the stuff, poisons, which we can get into, not by trying to free myself. That's important. Not by trying to free myself. I free myself by simply noticing how, not why, how I am imprisoning myself. This is the key, in the very moment in which I am imprisoning myself. It always works. It's like a law of the universe as far as I'm concerned. No. And I'll elaborate, but that's the crux of the matter.
And I appreciate that, because I too believe that when we shine a light on that, then we are not being that, right? The moment of noticing it, we're noticing that it is not who we are. And it's almost like those parts of us just want to get our attention. They really just want to feel validated with curiosity and I believe with compassion, so that they can go wherever they need to go and be released to wherever they need to be released. It's hard to kind of describe that, but tell us a little bit more about that, maybe even with some examples, if you don't mind, for those who this is kind of a new concept for.
Well, I'll just say this: as you begin to free yourself from that stuff, and it's a breath to breath, moment to moment process. It's not a once and for all thing. But once you start practicing with it, it becomes really easy on the spot to free yourself from that monster of the mind. And as you start to tap into the essence of that observer, which actually happens, I said it's like breathing on a flame. you start trusting that, because that force inside of you, I mean, it'll tell you who and what to go toward, who and what to get the hell away from, what to eat. I mean, it's just a very beautiful, beautiful gift directly from the creator of this whole shebang. I don't know how all that works. Nobody does. I mean, we have ideas about it, but something infinite, that power came together with something finite, this body, which is going to rot eventually, right? Those two things came together to create the entity, to form the entity that answers to your name. They're connected by your breath. So your breath, the breathing process becomes very important to the gremlin timing method. Very important. So I hope that's helpful a bit in terms of that power inside.
It is. And I've heard you share that in some of the videos that I've heard, wonderful videos of yours on YouTube. And it was kind of a profound moment for me to hear that. Of course, I've been trained in the breath and different breathing techniques and so on, but kind of that idea that the connection between that life force and that, our physical body is the breath. And the first time I'd heard it that way, and I have to say I paused and really sat with that for a moment. So thank you for that. And tell us a little bit more about how do we utilize the breath in order to be able to connect with that and maybe help us to notice what is, to observe.
Well, that's a beautiful question. When I wrote Taming Your Gremlin, breathing was not emphasized of course, it's the greatest gift you get, and every one of them is a fresh gift. So, but, believe it or not, in 1983, when I wrote Taming Your Gremlin, yoga was not big in the West. The whole Buddhist movement had not come to the West. There was talk about breathing, but it was just different. And now what I see is everybody's talking about breathing, which is good, but there's a part that's being left out, I think. It's true that if you belly breathe, oh gosh, there's so much we could get into about this, but by breathing properly, along with a few other things, you can really alleviate or certainly minimize the experience of anxiety. It's really helpful. So your breathing is a regulator. But it's not just a regulator. This part is left out a lot. It's an indicator. It's like a gauge on a car or something. When your breathing gets shallow, it's telling you you're at the front end of starting to make yourself anxious, or you're already anxious. You're glitching either in pain, emotional, otherwise situational, or in anticipation of pain, which impedes your problem-solving abilities. It's natural. It's a fight or flight reaction. But to cling to that gets in your way. So what you do is when you're paying attention to your breathing as a indicator, you start noticing when it gets shallow. That's followed by tension in your trapezius. That's followed by tension, discomfort, weakness, pain, wherever your most vulnerable area of the moment is. Okay? It's a big deal. So you don't have any choice about somebody blaring a horn at you or a loved one dying, the anguish that comes with all sorts of things. But you have choice about how long you hang on to the anguish. Sadness is a real good feeling if you let it be. It's not my favorite, but it's a rich feeling. But if you get in the way of it or you cling, I have no problem with anger. Anger handled constructively changes relationships for the better, brings about all sorts of good changes, riddance faces. I have a real problem, however, with people clinging to a resentment. That's like acid in a container. It's going to eat you up. But we have a choice about that. We don't have a choice about whether or not, as I said, somebody sneers at us or slugs us or we lose something, a loved one or whatever. We have a choice about how long we hang on to the tension around that. To the extent that we allow ourselves to just be fully human from that place deep inside, we move through life really smoothly, really smoothly. As smooth as we can, given the circumstances, is certainly not easy.
Here we are, right? We're human beings. We live our life. Things happen. We lose things. We lose people. We have expectations that perhaps are not met or fully met. And, we've got these voices, we've got these stories that we tell ourselves. What can we do to free ourselves from the habitual voices, the resentment, let's say, as you brought up in the example? What can people do to get relief?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the essence of basically our discussion, So I mentioned the importance of simply noticing. You're going to notice when you glitch. You're going to notice when that comes into your awareness, hopefully. And the way you're going to notice is, number one, your breathing is going to get shallow, and those other things I mentioned are going to occur. You're going to notice that. There are a few options to play with, but my favorite and is once you notice that, you're going to notice that you're doing one or all of these things. You're either scaring the hell out of yourself, beating yourself up, miring yourself in regret, which regret's not a bad thing. We can come back to that. But miring yourself in regret to the point of guilt. So creating a horror movie, beating yourself up, miring yourself in regret, clinging to a resentment, or the granddaddy of them all, trapping yourself in a concept of who you are and of how the world works. So you're going to notice that with practice. But the first thing you're going to notice is your breathing getting shallow and that tension. So let's say you're creating something happens, your employer sneers at you, or you get a bad performance review, or a romantic relationship is not going like you want it to. And so when your breathing gets shallow, your awareness becomes concentrated in your intellect, in your mind, the world of mind. It's not a terrible place. It's got beautiful memories, fantasies, nice channels, but there's some bad neighborhoods. So you get up there, and if you create a horror movie, let's pick one of those examples. Okay, boss sneers at you, We don't know what that's all about, but all of a sudden in your head, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. It's going to fire me. My romantic partner's going to leave me. It's all going to be over. I'm not going to be able to get another job. I'm going to be able to get a terrible review. I'm going to end up old and alone, which is everybody's fear, old and alone in an alley. I'm going to get eaten by rats, whatever it is. That whole horror movie comes up. It's important to, number one, accentuate the movie. Okay. Typically there's a point of absurdity you reach. Okay. There's a point of absurdity, but even if there's not, you don't just accentuate the horror movie. You accentuate the feeling in your body. So your breathing is shallow, your neck is tight, there's tension or discomfort elsewhere. You notice all those key points of tension and make them more. Just like you accentuated the movie, you accentuate that tension. And you can do this in a board meeting with practice. I mean, you just accentuate. What that does is it brings into the awareness of the observer, oh, I'm doing this to me. I'm the one clinging. I may not have started it, but I'm the one clinging to this. You don't even have to make a decision at that point. There is a natural correction that starts to occur, which is that Zen theory of change. I free myself not by trying to free myself. I don't bend the bars of the cage to get out. I catch myself in the act of building the cage. So when you notice that you're the one sitting there jabbing your thumb in your own eye, there's a natural correction that starts to occur. So because we don't have all the time in the world, for people just to fool with that, to take it seriously, you have control over how long you cling to any kind of misery. It's worth playing with. I just in the book Taming Your Gremlin, I talk about not only simply noticing, not analyzing, not working at it, just notice. And playing, I want to emphasize playing with options. What I've just described to you is an option. It's my favorite. But play with it, don't work at it. Just fool around with this stuff. See how it works for you. It's your cup of tea, keep playing with it. Because the benefits keep unfolding. They're not static. At least from my experience, it just keeps getting better and better and better. Because I practice, And I'm no master, by the way, of this. Not that anybody thinks I am, but I'm really a sincere practitioner. I really am.
Thank you for this, and that does work, by the way, that playing with that one option, because I think many of us, when we experience some physical sensation that's not comfortable or an emotion that does not feel good, the immediate impulse is to get away from that and to go do something, or to fix it, or to just run away from it.
Is that true for you, Very? Is that your immediate impulse?
Not since I've learned what I've learned. I've learned to get curious. I've learned to pause and take a breath, and to really just notice, as you write in your book, to notice, what are the sensations that I'm feeling? Is it a tension in my chest? Is it something in my stomach? Is it in my shoulders? And what color, shape, texture, temperature, and the moment that I really give it that attention from a place of just curiosity, that softens. It begins to soften immediately, and it's like it's being heard for the first time, and then it can choose to go, and it chooses to go play. That's often what I see in my work, when those parts of us are really seen and heard, and observed, just from curiosity, not needing to understand why or anything like that, but just curiously being observed. Then those little parts of us are free, and and there's a softening. And oftentimes when we speak to those parts, they go play. They're like little kids.
So say something about, I really appreciate what you're saying. Your emphasis on curiosity, I think, is beautiful. So say something about those parts.
Yeah. So, and what I'm referring to, there's a model of therapy called internal family systems, and it's basically as in the taming, the gremlin taming method. It's very, very, everything, of course, is aligned because it's the truth. It works. And it starts with first observing what is going on, and really being present with it. What are we feeling? Where is it in our body? And so on. And if there's certain parts of us that maybe are tensing or not, kind of being resistant to doing that work, we want to get nice and curious again, maybe ask those parts to give us a little space. And then, and only then, can we really, heal certain parts of us. And by heal, I mean to help them to see the truth. Because as you said, those beliefs of ours are just simply something that, forget your exact words, but that we've observed for a long time, and that we've told ourselves are true, even though they seem to be true. And for those ones that don't serve us anymore, it's just some stuck energy. But the moment that we simply observe, and we take that breath, and then and only then can it soften, and we can begin to feel better, but not by making it so.
That's an important emphasis. Yeah, well, that was beautiful. Virginia Satir, who was actually the first person who, it's why Gremlin took off in 1984, was, somebody told me she never endorsed books, but she endorsed Taming Your Gremlin. And so among family therapists, it got a lot of attention because Virginia, was a real pioneer in terms of systemic therapy. And she used to do a thing called a parts party, which was really beautiful. She was an amazing woman. I didn't know her well at all, but enough to be with her long enough to thank her. the beautiful endorsement, So I was thrilled. It's one of the few times, in fact, it may be the only time, when I got a letter from her saying how beautiful she thought Gremlin was, to please use this and all this stuff. I was by myself in my office, was in a house I had rented, and I literally jumped for joy. I remember that. I couldn't believe it. I was thrilled. She was an amazing lady, amazing.
Wow. Well, I have not met her as an NLP trainer. I'm familiar with her. Of course, she's one of the wonderful therapists that NLP is based on, and I'm familiar with her work. And it's oh my goodness, that that pure jumping for joy moment, I know, is something that is so delicious that some of us don't get to experience that in a whole lifetime. And it's a testament to the work and to the method and to the love that goes into it. So what other insights, or if I may say the word, advice or recommendations or ideas, can you offer? Can you offer to those listening that either in that category that they've never really allowed themselves to taste joy, or perhaps those that to the extreme that they're familiar is the place of guilt or resentment or shame or sadness? What can we do in addition to some of the wonderful advice that you've already offered around simply noticing and breathing, and to become even more integrated, right? That parts party, right? To become even more integrated with the wholeness of who they are.
Okay. All right. Well, there are a few things, but I want to comment. One of the poisons that you just reviewed was something about regret. I want to make clear there's a difference between regret and guilt. Regret is a perfectly natural one. If I accidentally step on your toe, or hurt you somehow, I'm going to, or stub my own toe, I'm going to regret that. But if that monster of the mind, that gremlin, which is vicious, remember I told you it's not cute, it's out to really get you. That thing charges in and starts assaulting your character. Schmuck, what are you always stepping on people's toes for? What's the matter with you? You clumsy oaf, you're never going to learn. My God, you need to go hide in a closet or whatever. It becomes a feeling called guilt, which is a real horrible, and I don't use this metaphorically, it's a poison. It's going to eat one up. It occurs right here in the upper abdomen, the lower part of the chest. It's a horrible feeling to cling to. It affects everything. Your organs, your musculature, your skeleton. It's a bad thing. Anyway, but here's a tidbit, because I think Verida, it's really important to me that people leave with some things they can use. So we've covered accentuating what's there physically and all that. We've talked about breathing, talked about simply noticing. In addition to the breathing thing, I guess if there's several other tidbits, but one I would give that I think it's the thing I get the most letters about, and that is to really stay aware of where you end and everything else on this physical plane. I'm told there are many, but I don't know about all that. On this physical plane, there's a miraculous sheath that separates you from the rest of the world. It's waterproof. It's tough. When the top layer of it gets rubbed off, it's replaced by living layers below. It's very sensitive. It's your skin. It's surrounded by an energy field. When people in your environment, even or things come close to your skin, you can feel them. You don't have to make contact that way. You feel that, and there's an energy field. But in addition to being a remarkable organ, it's the largest organ in the body, a very sensitive receptor, it's also a boundary. It's a vibrating boundary. Every experience you have in this life occurs within the boundary defined by your skin. Events occur around you, and a lot of them involve you, even if you don't want them to. I mean, I've worked with people immediately after bombings, for example. They don't want that, but the experience happens within their body from the skin in. Well, on the most fundamental level, if you can stay aware of the surface of your skin and stay very aware of what's happening with your breathing, on the most fundamental level, if you can keep this thing feeling cool, calm, collected, and relatively content relative to the circumstances, you're pretty much doing you're home free. It's just it's real efficient. It helps. Easier under some circumstances than others, but it really helps. So I tell people, actually stay aware of, it's not a philosophy. You got to feel this air on your skin and clothes on your skin, as if you're traveling around in a spacesuit. And what that produces is a feeling of creative indifference. That's Fritz Perl's term. It's not mine. Creative indifference. Or loving detachment, I say sometimes. It's not just a don't give a damn. It's clarity. It's real clarity about, oh, I'm inside here. From that position, you can love better. You can fight better. You can think clearer. You don't love less. You love more. It's like you start respecting other people's experience. We're just a bunch of us traveling around in our own little spacesuits here, you know. But that spacesuit is very porous and very sensitive to what goes on around us, which is a beautiful gift. And it's a boundary. So if I were going to just give people two gifts, two of the several things I call the basics of pleasure, one would be your breathing is a regulator and an indicator. And the other would be stay very aware of the surface of your skin. It's the thing I get the most kind of communications about, you know, people saying, I don't get the skin thing. It's just so simple. So eventually they'll hear from them. They'll say, I finally got the skin thing. You know, I mean, it's so, once you get it, it's very helpful. Produces a thing called clarity. So.
And in terms of practicing that for my own clarity, you mentioned noticing the air on your skin, the clothes on your skin. And so when we pause and kind of do that kind of check-in process of where we end and everything else begins, or vice versa, so to speak, of course, it all continues. As you said, there's an energy field, there's a connection. But what happens in the moment that I pause, pause what I'm doing to just notice that?
Well, for one thing, if I could write the script, and again, this takes a lot of practice. I've got some tricks that I'll mention to you, but you wouldn't just do it when you're going to pause and do it. You'd practice all day long, breath in, breath out. It's what we're doing is turning our lives into a living meditation with the method. The Gremlin Taming method is really turning your life into a meditation. Well, all meditation is very gentle control over your awareness, which at any point in time can either be on what's going on around you, what's going on inside you, which of course either of those things grounds you in the present, or in the world of mind. You're always going into one of those zones. The idea is to gently notice where your awareness is. But to do that, you have to stay aware of where you end, all else begins. Keep your breathing clear. Just notice. I've had the good fortune of participating in the postgraduate training of hundreds of therapists. And so often, during the first year or so, I'll get questions like, are you telling us not to think? It's like, no, I'm not telling you not to think. What I'm saying is know the place of thought. Know that it's not the whole enchilada. There's something else going on called real life right here. And if what happens varied, so I'm looking at you. And So I see you look in this direction. You're actually smiling. I know that's going on because I see it. It makes me feel good. I feel that in here. Okay. And I also feel myself slapping myself. So there's this and that. That's real. Now, I'm going to keep talking for another 30 seconds or so. But imagine if what happened is, instead of imagining you were listening to me, which is what I'm doing, if I imagined you were mad at me, my whole behavior would change. But what happens so often, it happens with all of us, is we contaminate what's going on with our ideas based on past experience and fears about the future. We contaminate that with what we think is going on. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're light years off. But the point is, just notice what's really going on. Get here. There's a lot of talk about being here now. I'm not saying be here now all the time. I'm not saying be here and here all the time. I am saying establish the here and now as your home base. That's here and here, and come home several times an hour, all day long. Really, in answer to your question, because I get it, people wonder how can I do that? Well, I cheat. I place reminders around. I've got pictures of my favorite teacher. I've got things my son and my wife have given me, but I have to move them or they become fixtures, But when I see them, they're reminding me, Rick, go home, get back inside. The other thing I do is when I change settings, not literally room to room, unless I'm going to a new encounter with somebody, but from my house to the car, I always take a moment when I change settings to go inside. It does take a breath, maybe two, to recenter, to come home and start again. I want to have the feeling I'm starting over and over and over again, with a head full of history, of course, but that I just got here. I like that feeling. Maybe everybody doesn't. I don't know.
I sense that it brings choice when we kind of shift and reset, if you will, by taking the moment or two. Then we're off of whatever program might be happening or being run in the moment, and we get to choose how we want to proceed. And I think there's a freedom in that. And I think that's one of the gifts of taming the gremlin, if you will, following the process, the simple, not easy, as you said, but simple practice that. I think that's what comes, is a realization that we are not our thoughts. We can observe the thoughts, but we get to choose the thoughts once we realize that they are not us. And if they're not serving us, we can redirect. And that's the ultimate freedom.
We're not our minds, although we would be real bores without the mind. Yeah, actually, the sequel to Taming Your Gremlin, a masterclass in gremlin taming, the title I wanted, and I was going to explain all this, but was going to be The Mind is a Terrible Thing. And HarperCollins thought it was too negative, and we kind of argued about it. But anyway, they convinced me that I could have a chapter that said that. So there's a chapter in a masterclass about that. A masterclass in gremlin taming, by the way, for those people that are coaches and therapists or in leadership positions. I really recommend it. It's a good one, especially for the coaches and therapists, because it's got a lot of very concrete examples about how it also focuses, by the way, on creating rewarding relationships. The whole last half of the book's about that. There are a lot of examples for therapists and coaches about how to use the method. So.
Thank you. And I myself will check it out. And I have a question for you before we complete here.
Sure.
Actually, two questions, if it's okay. So one is, as you reflect back to the 5 decades plus the decades before that of life, pre all of this, what is it that, was the kind of juiciest, most insightful, bright learning opportunity that you have ever had?
Man, I mean, there have been so many. I mean, from the time I was a little kid, uh, where I think this is true for most everyone, is there's some point, it happens a few times in life, where you get catapulted to a new level of an area where, oh, I didn't know I could do this. Or you discover, I mean, I can tell you, a beautiful woman who is now a really well-known artist who had never done anything she considered creative before. All of a sudden, she discovered that through the method. A very simple thing that happened for me is I really had the honor. I was running. I was what was called the clinical director of a program in Chicago, serving poly drug abusers and families that were in crisis for all sorts of reasons. And I was supervised some of the most wonderful therapists I've ever worked with, and most of them, by the way, did not have graduate degrees. But I trained them, and they were really excellent. But in any event, we had a 24-hour program where we would, if a kid got busted or overdosed on acid or mescaline or downers, for crying out loud, or some other drug, we went to the ER to grab them. Or if a kid got arrested, we would go to the police station and get them out. In those days, those people didn't know how to handle somebody who was using hallucinogenic drugs or anything. They just didn't know. They'd try to pump their stomach when the acid was already in their system and everything. So, but in any event, one of my people got ill and couldn't show up. And I had to drive in a beat up Volkswagen from where I lived to a whole other part of the Chicago area, into an old house that we operated out of. I was sitting there by myself, drove through a Chicago winter snow, probably 3 a.m. I'm sitting there by myself and I'm pissed off. I'm disgruntled. I'm just like, there are plenty of people I could blame, but it occurs to me it's 3 a.m. I'm sitting here making myself miserable. Nobody else is here. I have to be doing this. So I started doing some work with myself. And quite frankly, this is about 1972. Okay. The image that came to mind, and again, this is well before the movie Gremlins, was a gremlin. I didn't even know about gremlins. A gremlin was a car, but an image of a gremlin. And I just, that duality became so clear to me, it started affecting I didn't use the term gremlin for a long time, but it affected everything I was doing with people. It became clear to me, I know how this works. And all of a sudden, it's like I knew what I was doing all of a sudden. And then, 10, 12 years later, when I wrote the book, I was going to write it as a kind of a metaphysical book or a book for therapists. And then I thought, hell, I'll just write it to everybody. And that image kept coming up. So I called it Taming Your Gremlin. So that was it's a simple experience, but it was a very powerful experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like such an intense, real moment. And there was a choice that was made. And I'm grateful that you received that light and pursued that choice. And
something you've really emphasized, Spirit, which I really appreciate, is that it is all about getting to the point of choice. And that's what the playing with options section of the book is about. It's really about getting to the point of choice. But you'll notice, if you really simply notice, you don't always have to make a choice. But there's several. But if you play with options, that's the second tier in the Gremlin Timing Method, is play with options. Yeah. I really appreciate your emphasis on that, definitely. And on curiosity, I thought that was really beautiful and important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember the section and the emphasis on play in the book. And this podcast is, the essence of it is the mindset game. And
Yeah.
once we realize that we get to play, and when we do it lightly, and because we realize that it is possible to feel better, then we can give ourselves permission to do the things that you've shared with us today, so that we too can explore and notice what shows up for us when we do.
Yeah.
And when we do that, then of course we want to do it over and over and over again, because it
Yeah.
just makes life even more sweet.
That's the third tier, is to be in process, which basically means do it over and over and over and over again. So, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed being with you very much, and I hope people, benefit.
I'm certain that they will. And one last question, if it's okay. I imagine it's a very brief one as we complete here. A little baby being born into the world, and you getting to share one little bit of insight or wisdom to help that sweet child have the best, highest life for them. What would you want them to know?
I could really get it in there. Would be from this time on, you've got only two charges. One is to survive, and the other is to really enjoy this life. Really enjoy. And when I say this life, I don't mean your circumstance, the life that's right inside of you. Really enjoy it, because just for no reason other than the fact you don't know how long it's going to last, but enjoy it. That's the whole deal. That's what the Gremlin Taming Method is about. So,
thank you. And how can people learn more about your work, your wonderful books, so that they get to experience that for themselves?
well, Taming Your Gremlin, that book, also a masterclass in gremlin taming. There's a web page, which I'm in the process of revamping. I haven't done anything to it in years. It's tamingyourgremlin.com, and they can contact me through that. And if they're therapists or coaches, anybody that wants further training in the method, I'm not offering any kind of formal training right now. But if somebody has a real sincere interest in learning, and they've read the books, at least the first one, and they contact me, I'll connect with them somehow, and we'll talk. I won't necessarily take them on, but anybody that has a really sincere interest, and there are people that come with such a thirst. There are other people that just, I want to get some kind of certification. Well, I'm not your man, But if you have a real thirst, you want to learn how to use this in your life and with other people, probably help you.
Well, thank you from my whole heart, Frank.
My pleasure, Eric. You're great at what you do. You really are. And I think what you shared is really valuable. And what you do share on an ongoing basis. People are very fortunate to have access to you. So thank you.
To you and your work as well. And I wish you continued energy and vibrancy and well-being, so that you can bring even more love into our world. That's what you do. So thank you.
Thank you.